Ready ho.
How's it going?
Pretty good. All clear on my mic.
Yeah, you said me?
All right. Yep. Sounds pretty good. Looking forward to today.
Yes, I am. I've definitely been wanting to do today's show for a while.
I think this is probably going to be my favorite episode so far, and I really hope we have a lot of conversation today.
Yeah, thankfully, I think what I noticed is a lot of people have more time on Saturdays to actually join in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think today will be some fun.
Yeah.
We got 4 minutes till official start time, so I think we just kind of should chat for a little bit because I don't want to start when everyone's maybe not ready yet.
Yeah.
Plus, there's nobody on.
So I didn't realize, but do you this project that you did over homicides and gun laws, when did you actually do that? Was that anytime recently?
Yeah, it was actually pretty recently, like maybe a week or two ago or so. I did it for my statistics class. Um, they
Okay.
wanted us to research some stuff and figure out some numbers. I'm not gonna, like start spouting out statistics one way or another. I'm just gonna give raw data, like the straight up numbers.
Right.
So
Okay.
I'm gonna reference those. I'm thinking referencing pewresearch.org, um,
Yeah,
and a
that's a good.
couple other places. Google's got a bunch of what would you call this? Google's got a bunch of scholarly resources on it, so that'll be help.
Okay.
Hello to the person who has joined, my friend. Welcome.
Welcome, welcome. We did
Yep.
start a little bit early, but we're glad that you were able to join.
Yeah, absolutely. Every person matters.
All lives matter.
Amen. Yeah. So today we're talking about gun control. We're going to be well, I guess we're really talking about the Second Amendment. Why it's relevant, which that also is going to mean gun control in the modern day. We're talking about the historical importance of gun control, why it was made. Um, yeah, pretty much the whole history on the Second Amendment. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with that today.
Yeah, it definitely helps when you love guns that you learn enough about them to be able to talk without sounding like an idiot.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, yeah, when you love guns, you do a lot of research one way or another, and I enjoy doing research on both sides. So looking forward to some conversation, some maybe some debate. That'd be fun.
Yeah, and that's another thing is anyone that wants to pipe in, feel free. Just remember we try to keep the comments clean so that way we can expand the number of people that are able and willing to listen to this. So we appreciate any clean comments. You know, prefer to limit your cussing and yeah, we know that this is, especially when it comes to gun control, is a very hotly debated issue. But hopefully we can talk and debate with people in a logical form without appealing too much to emotions or um, things that don't necessarily align with facts.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of emotion in gun control and the Second Amendment. Those who are pro-gun, we feel very strongly about it. Those who are anti-gun normally also feel very strong about it. So there's a lot of emotions going on. But just because I think there's a lot of emotions does not mean that we want a lot of anger and a lot of maybe profanity and stuff being spewed. So calm, reasonable debate is what we're looking for here. So thank you
Yeah,
to everyone who's tuned in right now. Um, we're looking forward to a real fun day.
yeah, this should be a lot of fun. I think this will be really enjoyable, especially to get other people's opinions, because I know that both of us are very strong supporters of the Second Amendment, and I'm sure there will be some people listening that are only, I guess, partial supporters that maybe want stricter gun laws than we want, or various stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's not one way or another. There's a middle line there, and I'm looking forward to some conversation. So,
Yeah.
right off the bat, me and Spencer were both very pro-gun, Second Amendment, strong Second Amendment supporters. Um, we were both born into it, and some people might tell us, "Oh, we're just being indoctrinated, or we're just following what our parents have said." But no, there is no just follow the line between me and Spencer. We are very we do our own research. We have our own motives.
Yeah, and I will say that's one of the things that every person would do. But as you get older, you realize that your parents don't necessarily see the world how you see it, and so you do the fact check, as the fact checkers would say. You do a fact check on what they say, and in terms of the Second Amendment, thankfully, I agree basically unanimously with my parents and with other members of my family. On guns and where the gun laws should be and various other stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think gun laws are something that's, well, I mean, you can find it all over the internet. It's consistently referenced as um, ingrained in American society because it's been there from the beginning. Um, the Second Amendment is something that has helped to define this nation world over for many, many years. Everybody knows that the U.S. is there's gun owners, we're pro-gun people. It's something that's generally associated with the United States.
Yeah, and it's really part of our culture as well. If honestly, especially at the founding of our nation and throughout its history, if you tried to separate guns from the American identity, it would be extremely hard to do so, just because guns are tied so intrinsically to Americans and what we believe about freedom and personal rights and everything. It's they're really hard to separate from the American identity.
Yeah, exactly. The Second Amendment has not been around for every single year of the United States because it was ratified on December 15th in 1791. So it wasn't 1776 immediately gun rights, but there was a lot of trying to figure out what we were going to do at the beginning of the country as soon as we had won the American Revolution. Um, and then as soon as we had the Constitution created and we were becoming a fledgling country, we almost immediately, created and ratified the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America, which says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That gives every single American in this country the right inherent in everything they own to own a weapon, a firearm, and the government cannot take it away from them. Um,
Right.
yeah, all over the country, you see countries, countries, you see states that are more strict on gun laws than others. Um, Personally, I believe in uh, the gun laws being pretty basically. There are things that need to be done, such as background checks and stuff like that. But to restrict whether the general public can own this gun or that gun, or what they can have on this gun and that gun, I see that as an encroachment on um, as an encroachment on the Second Amendment.
Well, and a lot of these gun laws that politicians propose, they propose a gun law like a very well known one is the shotgun handle, where it had to be like at a 45-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle, and all these various gun laws. A lot of them, if you look at them, you look at it and you think, okay, what is this actually supposed to do? Right? The only point of a gun law should be to ensure that a larger portion of people are protected. That should be the basis for a good gun law. And if you look at that law and a bunch of other ones, really all that is a 45-degree handle on a shotgun going to stop someone who's going to shoot someone from using that shotgun? No. All it did really was say to the gun manufacturers, okay, now you have to switch all your manufacturing to a new style. And really all it did was do harm to the gun industry. It really did nothing to protect other people. And you can look at various gun laws, and a lot of them are that situation where um, people propose a gun law, it gets passed, and then really all it does is make it harder for the law-abiding citizens to own guns or to own the guns that they need to protect themselves.
Yep. Real quick, we got our first message of the day, and then I'll go ahead and say some evidence in on this.
I shoved a whole bag of jelly beans up my ass.
Okay. Yeah. Please keep the conversation clean. That was dumb
Yeah.
and pointless.
We appreciate keeping them clean and also keep them relevant. Obviously, that's not relevant to our show, and
Spam.
yeah, spam. We appreciate constructive comments that people leave. For those listening, please leave comments. We really appreciate the format that Stereo allows to have the audience leave comments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the main reason. That's like literally the main reason that we do this in Stereo, where we can be live like this.
Yeah.
So real quick, going forward with some of that evidence that I said I was going to do right before his message. In the United States versus Cruikshank, the Supreme Court case of 1876, the Supreme Court ruled that, quote, the right to bear arms is not granted by the Constitution, neither is it any manner dependent upon that instrument for its existence. The Second Amendment means no more than that it shall not be infringed by Congress and has no other effect than to restrict the powers of the national government. In my opinion, and the opinion of many people in this country who support who support the Second Amendment, that ruling right there was unconstitutional. And I don't say that when I talk about the Supreme Court, I don't use them as the final word, the final thing that whatever they say goes, and I totally believe in it. Whatever they say, that must be how constitutional is, because the Supreme Court is run by imperfect people. And there are opinions and there are goals and drives that are ingrained in what they're doing. And this ruling that the Second Amendment just cannot be infringed upon by Congress and cannot be restricted by the powers of the national government, to me, that is wrong, because the Second Amendment doesn't say the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say shall not be infringed by the Congress and the national government. It says shall not be infringed, period.
Right.
There's no proviso that says one person over another or one local government versus a state government can restrict gun rights. It just says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period. So there are things that someone would say, well, the Supreme Court ruled this way or another, and I'm happy if anyone wants to bring that up in their comment. But just because a far-flung court in Washington, D.C. ruled that the Second Amendment cannot be infringed by Congress or restricted by the powers of the national government does not mean that that's what I believe. And so I'm working off my beliefs, and I'm working off evidence to back up that. So just throwing that out there for everyone who wants to say
it. In my thinking, the way I think there, and you can add more to this if you think there are any I missed, there are three main reasons we have the Second Amendment or a guarantee, or three ways that we use the Second Amendment, I guess is a better way to put it. One is the liberal one that they say, oh, you only need a gun for hunting. Sure, I'd like a gun for hunting. If I need, I can go hunting with a AR or whatever. So that's one reason. But obviously, if that had been the main reason for the Second Amendment, they would have put in there a well-regulated militia being necessary to get food, right? It's not in there.
Yeah.
The second reason is for self-defense on a small scale, whether it's a single person attacking you or a gang or someone's breaking into your house. You need a weapon to not only even the playing ground in that situation, but to up the playing ground so that you are at a higher level and able to defend yourself and your family and anyone else who might be in your care. And then obviously the third reason is stated in the Second Amendment, being necessary to the security of a free state. That is a large reason why we have the Second Amendment and why the founders were so ensured that they wanted to make sure that this got through, was because they looked at the government they had just left, which was a tyrannical, king-led government. They had just fought it off with guns and won their freedom, and they said, we don't want ourselves to turn into a monarchy or a tyranny again, so we need to have that barrier against the tyranny that could come. If we let the citizens have guns, then they will be able to protect and be a barrier against tyranny.
Yep, absolutely. There's no the gun laws, and there's opinions where people are like, we shouldn't have guns, or we should restrict guns because guns owned by the everyday person in this country leads to more violence. People can do mass shootings, and they can hurt or murder one person or another. And how I look at that is, what would we have without that? Okay, so this is an analogy that I try to make, what people normally don't listen to because a lot of people aren't very open-minded about this. I look at it from the point of view where if you were to, let's say the government came out tomorrow, okay, we're doing a hypothetical situation here. Let's say the government came out tomorrow and somehow found a workaround for the Constitution, for the Second Amendment, and said, we are now banning every gun owned by every person in this country, whether you're using it for hunting, it doesn't matter what kind of gun it is, every gun gone now. Turn them in tomorrow, we're doing a buyback program. Kind of like how they did in Australia. Let's say that this is a hypothetical situation. Let's say that happened, okay? The individuals who would give up their weapons are the individuals in this country who respect this country, who love this country, and who are law-abiding citizens. So I can't speak to what I would do in that situation, because honestly, I would probably be starstruck.
Yeah, that is a violation of our rights.
Yeah, that's an absolute violation of our rights. That's why it's a hypothetical situation, because I find it very unlikely that will ever happen. But we're going to go ahead and assume it was possible for the sake of an argument against the Second Amendment. If the individuals who are law-abiding all of a sudden give up all their right to defend themselves, and they are now left with tasers, pepper spray, and knives, an individual who has an individual with a criminal background, who are the ones who commit felonies, who go around and rob places, hurt people. These are the individuals that they have always committed these acts that people are always appalled by, such as the Las Vegas shooting. Those people are people who are bad people. The bad people, the reason they're called criminals is because they don't obey the law. I don't understand some of the argument where people say, well, if you just take away all the guns, all of a sudden the problem will go away. No, criminals are called criminals because they don't obey the law. That's why they're called criminals. And if you take away the right of the law-abiding citizens to protect themselves, the criminals are just going to be like, well, hey, wait a second here. I now have nobody fighting against me except maybe the police, depending on how that law were to pan out, and a cop get here in the amount of time that I could walk into someone's house or place of business and rob every single thing I want. So
exactly, it's going to embolden.
You lose. You would embolden individuals who are already committing these horrible acts, and you are creating a situation where people can now have the freedom to do whatever they want because they're no longer being stopped or blocked from committing these acts. Right? If you were to walk into some small town USA bar or something like that, where there's a whole bunch of people who are walking around in there with open carry revolvers or concealed carry, there's no criminals or robbers that are going to walk in there and walk up to the cash register and say, "Give me everything in the drawers," because they're going to know in 2 seconds flat they're going to have 10 weapons drawn on them. It's going to be like, "Get out, or you're going to die." It's very simple. Having the ability to protect ourselves allows not only for a well-regulated militia that is essential to backing up the freedoms of the common people against any government that were to become oppressive. It's also a matter of every single day events in our lives. There's nobody that walked into the Las Vegas shooting and said, "Well, I know here in a little while there's going to be a shooter coming from up there, and I'm just going to go ahead and stand right here." They had no clue that was going to happen. But gun rights give us the ability to say, "Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, but now I have the ability to protect myself." I remember a situation, it was 2 years ago, where there was a thief, a criminal who walked into, I believe it was an arcade, and a grandfather was there with his wife and their grandson, and he was concealed carrying. When the robber walked in, he brought him to the register, pulled out a weapon, threatened the attendant there at the cash register, and then turned around and brandished his gun at every other person in the store, telling them all to get on the ground. He specifically threatened the grandfather's grandson, and as this was happening, the grandfather was able to draw his pistol, aim at the person. He took a shot, protected his grandson, his wife, and himself, and every other person at the store from a person who was very agitated and was now pointing a weapon at a child. Well, I mean, pointing a weapon at anybody in a violent way for unconstitutional reasons that's not self-defense, that alone is a crime. And you shouldn't do that. But to point a weapon at a child just further backs up that you just, those are criminals that don't respect the law. They don't respect common sense. They obviously don't care about the law, and they're willing to sacrifice other people to get what they want.
And that's part of why we can talk about like concealed or open carry on another episode specifically, but that's why I really appreciate that most states have the ability for you to concealed or open carry, because if I'm a criminal and I go into a place and I see 50 people with guns that are open carrying, I'm going to go, I don't want to rob this place. I'm going to go somewhere else. And even if they are concealed carrying, if I'm in a place where I know people are allowed to conceal carry, and especially in states that concealed carry rates are higher, whether that's like Texas or Florida, etc., and I go into a place, if I'm a criminal there who's going to rob or murder, it doesn't matter what I'm trying to do. If I know that there's a very high likelihood that someone in this room has a gun and could shoot me because I'm about to do something wrong, then as a criminal, I look at that and I say, I'd rather not. And so I go to a place that has stricter gun laws, or I go to a place that makes it much harder to get your concealed carry or to get your open carry permit. And I go to those places because I know that there's a less likelihood of me getting hurt. And that's the whole thing, is that as a criminal, I want everyone to be disarmed, because then it makes my job a lot easier and I don't have to worry about getting shot myself. I only have to worry about what I'm going to do to the other people. Criminals are not going to give up their guns because the government said, okay, you need to give up your guns, right? The government banned selling cocaine. And yet there are still people that are addicted to cocaine, and there's still people that make millions of dollars selling drugs. And just because they made it illegal didn't mean that it stopped happening.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple messages here, so I'll go ahead and answer one. I'll listen to some of those, and then we'll go ahead and continue.
What do you say to people who claim that the United States of America is the greatest country in the world?
We
That they're totally
specifically
right.
agree with them. You can actually go watch one of our past episodes. I think maybe it was day 3, where we talked about various stuff, but we talked about how America is the greatest country in the world, and we very strongly believe that. A lot of that comes down to the Second Amendment and the fact that we have the right to protect ourselves. But besides we could list a million reasons why America is the best country, and one of the basic and best ones to cite is that we have absolute free speech, and we have very few limitations on our speech.
Yep, and in modern day, our free speech is something that's being brought up in question, and that's something that we covered. And yeah, that was day 3. That was when we talked about censorship, um, um, and we believe the U.S. is the greatest country in the world just because we have simple things that no other country in the world does. You know, there's no other country in the world that provides such a strong defense of the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, of the freedom of the press, the freedom of free speech, the freedom of religion. There's no other country in the world that protects the right to defend yourself, with like our second constitution, the right to privacy, like you have in the 14th Amendment. There's no other country that does this, and so we're not going to get into, I mean, we could, but we're not really going to get into why the U.S. is the best country in the world. But we just want to, for the gentleman who asked that, yes, we do believe that the U.S. is the best country in the world for simple reasons such as that.
Yeah, and you can refer back to our censorship episode, and you can go back to the episode we did about the Constitution and President's Day. Those two are a great place to find what we believe about America and it being the best country ever.
Yep, and they're also on YouTube if you want to go watch them there.
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Here's another one.
Those criminals that they don't have legal guns because they don't apply for legal guns. They have to buy guns on the black market. So how are they going to deal with those?
Exactly. You don't have criminals with an extensive background history of stuff, because they have to get that checked at the ATF before they are allowed to purchase a firearm. You don't have them going into a gun store and buying guns because they can't buy guns. They'll get turned down from their background check. Especially if they're, like in process criminal that hasn't served their time yet, they're going to get arrested.
Right.
But yeah, so when you take away the right of the people to own a firearm, then you take away because when you buy a firearm and get a background check, that gun gets registered to your name. So there's documents and there's lists online of this gun's registered to this person, not online, sorry, that are securely held by the government, that says this gun is registered to this person, they own this, yada yada yada. And you can report a gun as lost or stolen, but when you remove the ability of a person and you use those registrations to go and say, okay, well, this person have a gun, we need to go get that back from them. Well, then you now remove the ability of an individual to defend themselves, because they now have individuals who have illegally acquired guns, and they are not going to give them up just because the government says we're going to take the guns back now. It's just not how that works.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of politicians, especially on the lower level, I think more the U.S. Congress, those people that are pushing gun laws, they know it's not going to do much help. That is their way of virtue signaling. But I think a lot of the lower level politicians, a lot of them, I'm sure, are doing this because they actually think it will help. They've been told over and over that it will help. And unfortunately for them, if you just apply a little bit of logic and you think about it for more than a second, and you'll realize, okay, wait a second, criminals are going to do what criminals do. That's why we call them criminals. And they're if you pass a law, a criminal is not going to follow the law, and therefore the only person it can hurt is the law-abiding person who is not a criminal.
Yep. We'll go ahead and listen to another message, and then I think we can move on to some of the what's happened when gun laws have been removed in history.
Sure.
I was just thinking, with the current crisis that Texas... Damn it, I dropped it. With the current crisis that Texas is in, wouldn't the problem be...
That was entertaining. Yeah, please have intelligent conversation. It sounds like you were blowing really hard into the mic. So if that was on purpose, please don't do that again. If you weren't, then I'm sorry for getting angry at you, I guess.
Well,
we're looking for intelligent, coherent conversation here. We're trying to have a debate.
Yeah, we'll take another message and then see how we can respond to that.
America is not the best country in the world, and that belief, that American exceptionalism that you guys have, is why you have the problems you have today. Just pointing that out. Your American exceptionalism is the reason and the cause for the problems you've had and the problems you have.
See, I believe a little differently, and thank you for saying something. I do really so enjoy when people have other beliefs than us. Please bring them forth. I believe differently. I believe that the individuals in our country who believe in American exceptionalism are the individuals who believe strongly in the Constitution. They believe strongly in our government being pure. The issues that we have today are due to one of two things. They're due to corruption or they're due to contention. Unfortunate circumstances or things are brought about by people fighting or with each other or and stuff like that, whether it's the left versus the right, Republicans versus Democrats, those things. That's some issues happen with that contention, and that's something that is partly inherent to our country, but I don't think the what you're implying is the issues that we face today are issues that come just from that. The big issues are the ones that come from corruption. You have individuals in very liberal cities that are run by Democrats, where they have strict gun laws, and those cities very much so see a rate of higher deaths, higher murders and homicides, higher suicides. They see people living in poverty quite often, where they live in very poor conditions compared to the rest of the country. Those are cities that are run by Democrats who, in really in common sense and in my opinion, they give a lot less care to the individuals that they have authority over, to their constituents. They really just care about elections, winning the election, getting paid, whatever it is, more power to themselves, that kind of stuff. And
that's that corruption coming in.
Yeah, that's where the corruption comes in. And you have instances like some of the BLM and Antifa riots that happened over the summer last year, and those were funded by corrupt individuals, and the result was violence widespread across the country. And there was a significant number of BLM protests that were peaceful, yes, but when you have such incredible violence coming from part of those riots, then I negate the benefits because, just to begin with, I don't believe BLM actually has helped anybody. But we're not going to be getting into that. I'm just saying that the American exceptionalism is mainly believed by individuals who trust in our Constitution and in the pure form of our government, and that pure form is in reality tainted by those in government who, many of them who are career politicians, who care more so for themselves than for the actual country. And that's not what America was founded on. America was founded on individuals who believe in individuals in our government who should be working towards the betterment of the rest of our country versus individuals in our government who should be working towards the betterment of themselves. So American exceptionalism and strong patriotism isn't the issue. The issue is those who are non-American, who are against America, who still live in this country and work against us.
a really good point with your the two
Breaking up. You're breaking up.
issues coming from. Oh, you can hear me?
No, you're breaking up pretty bad.
All right.
Yeah, we'll take another message real quick here while Spencer's working on that.
Okay, I don't know how old you guys are, but you can't just, go on a public forum and start claiming that there's no other country that has the freedom of press, the freedom of religion, the freedom of blah, 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 blah. There's loads of countries in the West that are doing this way better than you guys because you guys have for-profit prisons. You guys have people that shoot people down in churches, in other places of worship. So what you guys are doing right now is jingoism. Jingoism, pure and simple. And you really need to check that.
Are you able to hear me, Colson?
Yep, I can hear you better now. To go ahead and and respond to what you said there. So when you say that there are countries in the West, and I'm assuming you're referring more to South America, that do things better than we do, I want you to real quick look at the climate that happens in Pennsylvania. Do a 5-minute search online for the murder capitals of the world. The U.S. isn't even in the top several of those. If you were to do a search for the murder capitals of the U.S., that would be different. But in the countries in the world that are murder capitals of the world, one second, let me go ahead and look that up right now so I can just give you
no problem.
Absolute.
While you're looking that up, I will counter your point about. I believe you said that. I don't know how old you guys are, but you're not able to just get on a forum and talk about American exceptionalism. I will strongly disagree with that because thankfully, America is the place where I can be a 5-year-old if I wanted, and I can talk about whatever I want. Thankfully, I think that is the thing. That is the First Amendment, and that is what makes America so exceptional, is that we have the ability for every single citizen to say what they want and say what they believe. Because in a lot of countries, judging from your accent, I'm going to guess that you're somewhere in England, that general area. And those are Western countries, and thankfully they have a lot of good values. They have a lot of good things going for them. But in England, people have
Still
been
breaking up.
jailed. Okay.
No, you're still breaking up pretty hard. You might want to mess with your Wi-Fi or whatever.
Okay, I'll now.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and... Oh, you're working now.
Okay. In England and various other countries across the world, people have been jailed and fined for saying something that someone thought was offensive. So that is one of the main reasons I think America is so superior, is because we don't fine people and we don't jail people for just saying something that someone doesn't like.
Yeah, exactly. We have now in the modern day world where we have, especially individuals who are more so on the left, they seem to believe that this being able to jail people or fine them for, or punish them in any way, whatever it is, for what they say or what they believe, that is a value that has ravaged our country, especially in the last year. That is not part of what this country stands for and is unique to our current times. So don't go judging the country by the actions of a few, especially such a very few group of people. But to go ahead and cite that most dangerous countries in the world in 2020, the murder rate per 100,000 inhabitants. I think there's, 30 cities here, 50 most dangerous cities of 2020. This is on Statistica.com. So they do a bunch of polls and use census stuff all over the world. There are 2 cities from the U.S. in here, New Orleans and Detroit, both of which we have covered are Detroit and liberal one cities where a lack of gun laws has allowed criminals to commit heinous acts and violence all over the place. And that also is due to gang violence. Every other city on this list that I can see, Brazil, Mexico, Brazil, mainly Mexico and Brazil, several Venezuelas on here. You're talking like 111.3 death murder rate per 100,000 inhabitants, down to 38.4, 34.8. Two cities from the U.S. that we already covered are due to this because they have liberal-run people who care more so for themselves and for the betterment of the city, are those who have allowed this violence to occur in those places. Every other city on here is cities in the West that you're saying who have done a much better job at this. I mean, I personally know that it's been in the news and it hasn't been recently, but in the recent past, where there was a mass exodus from Venezuela due to the political violence and dictatorships that happened there. So I would really, if you could back up more of what you're saying with evidence, I would appreciate that more. And you might have left a message in here, so we'll go ahead and move on to our next message and see if we can get something else in here.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you better now.
All right, I'm gonna mute for a little bit more just to try and fix this. So go ahead and play a message, and I'll be back as soon as I can.
All right.
And just to continue on, let's not forget that you guys don't even have universal health care. You have people dying from treatable illnesses because, I don't know, big pharma companies got to make their money. So you just let people die instead.
Okay, so that's not really what we're talking about today. If you'd like to tune into a later episode where we're going to be talking about healthcare sometime in the near future. If you'd like to tune in and leave that message there, then that'd be great. We can talk about it more in depth there, but just saying real quick, socialized healthcare is what you're referring to. Universal healthcare is a term that was mainly made up to justify socialized healthcare, and socialized healthcare is essentially everybody pays for everybody. And when you have a significant number of people, especially who live in those liberal-run cities in this country who live on welfare or even generational welfare, then you have people who work every day of their lives to pay for themselves who don't get care as good as they would have, because they're helping to pay for other people who don't pay for themselves. That's one of the reasons why we don't have socialized healthcare in this country. That's one of the reasons we avoid socialized really anything. There are things in this country that, yes, have fallen to things that could be deemed socialized. But when you have people who pay for everybody else to give them socialized healthcare, that's something that goes against the values of the U.S. to work for yourself, to bring, you can work to profit for yourself and your family. And so, we're just not even going to talk about that. And yeah, and a good example of socialized healthcare and why it's bad is that in Canada, there are instances of where you need a treatment, and sometimes very seriously, where you have to wait years for an operation that in the United States, if you work for yourself and you can pay for yourself or you have insurance, then you can go and say, boom, here we go, I need this operation done as soon as humanly possible, and they'll get to you as soon as humanly possible. Not whatever we get around to you, which is something that happens commonly in instances of countries that have socialized healthcare.
Can you at least concede that something needs to be done about your gun situation? Because if you can't even concede that, then school children will continue to die at the hands of other school children, and families will continue to be destroyed.
Yeah, that's something that I'm very, very glad you brought up. Does something need to be done? Something can be done. What that something is, I don't really know. And some people may say, well, how can you have an argument for the Second Amendment when you can't have an argument for more gun control and for this and that? And really, it's kind of something that you have to take with a grain of salt. And some people may say, how dare you say that? But think about it this way, okay? The individuals in those in some of this, like for instance, the school shootings, they commonly are, whether it's a university or a primary, whether it's primary or secondary schooling, elementary, middle, high school, colleges, universities, whatever it is, schools are usually instances of people being first-time offenders. It's an individual who was whether emotionally or mentally compromised in one way or another, and whether that was something that is part of their life or something that was inflicted upon them. They are almost, and I can't think of any instance right now that they are not first-rate offenders and that they've committed violence in that kind of scale before. All that I know of is that they are first-time offenders, that they have gone in and decided that they're going to hurt this or that person for whatever their personal reasons may have been to do this. What you imply there, in order to prevent situations like that, is a preemptive strike kind of thing, where in order to prevent that, we have to have things like gun bans universally across the U.S. that prevent law-abiding citizens from having weapons. And some of those instances are individuals who are underage who took a weapon, whether from their parents or from another individual, or attained illegally in one way or another. So there's no way to make that, to block that from being illegal. So what you're saying there is something that, as horrible and sad as it is, and I'm not absolutely not condoning it, because that's a horrible thing. Every single time it's an instance is saddened to this country. But it's something that the only way to prevent it is to ban guns universally, and to ban guns universally is the entire argument we're against right here.
And if you ban guns universally, then there are, I believe the stat was 3 million defensive uses of a firearm each year in the U.S., and that's not including ones where the gun was never fired. That was only ones where the gun was fired. So you're looking at millions and millions of lives saved because someone even just brandished a weapon at a criminal and said, "Get out of here." And
Yep,
so
and we can.
Go
ahead.
That's a little bit of the philosophy of do you stop the trolley cart to save the 5 people so it'll hit the 1? You can go into that if you want, but it's very obvious that there's so many more benefits to having guns than there are to not having guns.
Yep, and it's something that people who are anti-gun, they really need to keep an open mind about, because you look at that and you say, well, how dare you support school shootings? I mean, what kind of horrible human being are you? And we're not saying that we support school shootings. We're saying that we support the prevention of them. And this kind of topic right here, this can lead into a conversation about the justice system, where I believe that there would be less criminal instances in this country if we had stronger punishments, less comfortable jails, stuff like that. Maybe, if you had heavy background checks into teachers, and then you let teachers carry a gun like they used to before laws made that impossible, you could have a teacher carrying a weapon in the school classroom to make sure that there wasn't anybody who's going to do that. That's a conversation we can have at a later date in a different episode. But school shootings and mass shootings are something that school shootings are usually first-time offenders, and mass shootings they're a mix of first-time and repeat offenders. So it's a matter of it also boils down to the justice system. People, it's like a little child, right? A little child doesn't draw on and I've made this analogy before, but a little child doesn't draw on the walls of their parents' house with a crayon because they know they're going to get in trouble. If a parent doesn't punish their children and you do something like the reward system, which I actually believe is very ineffective. If you don't punish the child for drawing on the walls and they just don't get in trouble at all, but then they get rewarded when they don't, you're not making a better situation there, you're making it worse. It's a very simple analogy. It just takes a little bit of common sense to understand. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Take another message here.
Okay, guys, I'm going to stop listening now. I tried. You're clearly hypocritical. You're really going to sit there and pretend as if, like, the other side, the Republicans, are also not ridiculously...
Okay. No.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you for listening. We appreciate that you're willing to listen to an alternative point of view. A lot of a lot of people, especially in our country, are not willing, on both sides, not willing to listen to what the other side has to say. So thank you for listening, even if you disagree with us on a lot. What was his second point? I forgot it.
His second point that we had was that we had only pointed out non-Republicans, like Democrats and leftists, and that's not what we actually said. What we actually said was corrupt politicians and career politicians who work for themselves. I did imply that the left is worse about that, but there are definitely people on the right who are also guilty of working for the betterment of, we're corrupt and working for the betterment of themselves. There are career politicians or turncoats. They have instances like Romney. You have who was I'm forgetting his name, Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell. Yeah.
Yep, people that we trust, we thought were great, that are career politicians that have let us down and turned over. There are people on both sides who are working for the betterment of themselves. That's not what we said, but they're. I'm sorry that you didn't see that.
Yeah. So.
Yep, here's another message.
Democrats are corrupt. Republicans are corrupt. And it's a disease that has cost lives in the USA, and it will continue to cost lives because of people like you, but also because of a large portion of the population that are just resistant to constructive change because of this need for, control and to be better than and all that nonsense.
I will agree with you on that first half, that there is corruption on both sides, and both sides, I would say a large majority of both sides is corrupt, right? There are a few shining examples of good people, but even
Trump,
especially with the recent election issue, Ted Cruz, even he didn't perform as well as I thought he should have. And so there's definitely error and corruption on both sides.
Yep, absolutely. Your second point there. No, I'm forgetting your second point now. I just had it in my head.
It was basically that 74 million Americans all are just pushing the idea that America's great and we don't want to do anything constructive. We just constructive.
Your constructive change. What you mean by constructive change, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but so tell me if I'm wrong, since you are still on the show apparently. What you mean by constructive change is changing more over to, I'm going to, based on your accent, say you live in the UK or something like that. So you're saying change more over to that kind of government. And that's something that really would violate everything that I believe in. I believe in free speech and being able to say what I want without the risk of going to jail or being punished in one way or another, unless it infringes upon another person's rights. There's a certain just amount of being an adult and a mature person in any country in the world where you should be able to take an assault and shake it off and just grow up.
Yep. Exactly.
And so when you ask me how there are individuals in the UK and other countries in this world who can fine or report or get people punished for just saying something offensive, what that's really doing is just supporting a bunch of very childish and baby-like behavior for individuals who clearly don't have the ability to take care of themselves, since someone says something they don't like and that means they have to report them for criminally liable. I honestly don't get that. I don't know why the law is never made. And I'm thankful I don't have to ever understand that, because I live in such a great country where I'm allowed to say what I believe in. I'm not a support of gay people, but I don't hate gay people. And that's something that people kind of twist around all the time.
Right.
I support gun rights, but that doesn't mean that I support gun violence, right? That doesn't mean that I say, oh, well, you're just going to have to deal with it, that school shooting happened. I am just as saddened as everyone else is that that instances of violence happen in any country in the world. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to give up my rights because it makes someone else feel more comfortable. That means that I think there should be a change to make things more like the Constitution.
that's, I think, a big thing about our current culture in America and various other Western countries right now, is that our culture is so much of a comfort and of convenience being the supreme good that we are willing to give up the basic rights because we see that comfort and that convenience as the ultimate good rather than the ability to speak your mind, that ultimate good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that we have things that other countries don't have, and I think that a lot of Americans take that for granted, and that's something that we try to show that there are just, there are things that we have in this country that other countries don't have, and so we try to bring a little bit of light into why, um, and why these are such good things, and why it makes us unique, why it makes America the best country in the world. Things like this, that there are just individuals in our country who, despite their beliefs, they take for granted and they live a cush life, whether they are whether they partake in the news and they partake in voting and stuff like that, or they don't. Doesn't matter. They're individuals who just take for what we have for granted. So when you make some of these arguments, yes, don't think that I'm defending every single person in the country because there are bad apples all over the place.
Right. But and on top of that, the bad apple doesn't prove that everything is bad.
Exactly.
Just because there's a mass shooting or multiple mass shootings in America doesn't mean that America is bad. Just because there are mass shootings in England doesn't mean that England is bad. And that can be applied to literally almost any country in the world. Just because a few people do something bad doesn't mean that the rest of the country is bad. Most people, I would say, are flatline, trying to live a decent life, not trying to do necessarily, not trying to donate all their time and effort to caring stuff, but they're not all trying to just be evil. I think a lot of people are just kind of there existing, trying to live a good.
Yeah, and I'll just make an analogy real quick. What Spencer's saying there, where we don't want to be judging one instance or a small group of people against the mass group of people. And a good example of that, World War II, Nazi Germany. The German population was consistently oppressed by the Nazis, and the Nazis were the smaller portion of their population, and there were many of the Nazis, Nazi soldiers, the everyday foot soldier, they were commonly only led to believe, and many of them had issues with what they were commanded to do, but they were only led to even join in the first place due to a lot of propaganda that was created in World War II Nazi Germany, that pushed people to anger and then resulted in the worst possible circumstance, which was Nazi Germany, that led to the Holocaust. I think that is really important to make these analogies to history, because everybody has studied history, right? Everyone in here is supposed to be 18, so I would assume that you guys know what Nazi Germany is, and that you can understand what analogy I'm trying to make here. But when you judge the actions of one or two mass shootings and which are commonly one person, right? One person who does something illegal, you're judging the whole country. And like Spencer said, there's an average of about 3 million instances of self-defense with a firearm every year. Now, I'm just going to create a little picture here. Let's imagine that there's a robbery in process. A man pulls out his gun. The robber has his gun pointed at the other person. They're both going to shoot at each other, and the person who's defending himself, not the robber, the guy shoots first. There's an instance where there would have been one or more deaths due to if the guy who was defending himself had not pulled the trigger, that could have led to the death of himself and others. And then there are even more instances that are not recorded of individuals who had not fired a gun, who just by pulling a gun, they threatened someone and said, "You need to stop what you're doing, or I'm going to pull the trigger and you're going to get hurt." So that's just something that you have to constantly keep in mind. You can't not judge something that is inherent to this country, and that's something that so much of our country believes in, which is the right or maybe they don't believe it, but they still own a firearm. Something that's so important to us, and you're judging it on the acts of a few rotten apples.
And criminals even if you somehow got all the guns out of
You're breaking up.
assuming that you could get all the guns out of America, even for criminals. Criminals are criminals, and they're going to use whatever means they can to hurt people. So a gun is a tool, just like a computer is a tool, or a spoon is a tool. The gun is merely a means to an end. It is a way of doing something. So getting rid of
It depends on the
guns,
person.
yeah, it's the person that is the problem, not the gun itself. And if you take guns out of the hands of responsible people who know how to use that gun and know when to use it, they know to use it only in the extreme emergencies, then if you take it out of their hands, then in those emergencies, they're not able to do what they know they should do and what they could have done if they had a gun.
And then they're just subject to the will of a person who, as a criminal, we already know is someone who has lost a respect for the law and could potentially be someone who has lost a respect for human life. By taking away gun laws, you're just hoping, crossing your fingers, hope to die, that all the criminals in the country are just going to be like, well, we don't really need to murder these people now. But if they pull the trigger, there's nothing to stop them. It's literally completely up to their self-judgment of whether or not they'll pull the trigger and hurt someone, or whether or not they'll restrain themselves and not. And that is not a chance in any country in this world that I'm willing to just say, I'm just going to hope the criminal doesn't pull the trigger. Not a chance I'm willing to take.
We know that their judgment of whether to pull that trigger is already off because they are a criminal committing an act. There's obviously something wrong with their brain already, so don't rely on them having restraint.
Yeah, relying on a criminal is like relying on a criminal is like living on the beach of a hurricane and hoping the hurricane doesn't hit you. The chances are very low, and the chances are quite high that you're going to be hit with the hurricane if you're living on the beach. If you lose your ability to defend yourself, and especially if you live in areas where there's more high crime, then you're just saying, "Oh, I hope the hurricane doesn't hit me." Got another message here.
You shouldn't be comparing the USA to Venezuela or Brazil or South American, Central American countries. You should be comparing the USA to your peers in the G20 countries or the G10 countries or whatever the number is, and to countries in the quote-unquote West, in Europe. Yeah, come on, man. Like, seriously, Venezuela? You're going to compare yourself to Venezuela?
So
I'm sorry, you made the analogy of the West, and that's included in the West when you said the U.S. Has such high deaths. And yes, I will. Europe is part of that Western Hemisphere. But even those countries in Europe, in the U.K., Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, you guys don't have the laws to protect you like we do here. I mean, the best instance that we've already said like 20 times already is you can be punished and tried and found criminally liable or civilly liable, whatever it is, for offending someone with your speech. That doesn't happen here in the U.S.
I'm not sure if you were listening to our show, but we have compared America to England and to Australia and various other Western in terms of their ideology. I do think Venezuela is in the West, but it definitely doesn't operate on a Western style system. But we have compared it. If you go back and listen to this show, we have compared it to various other Western countries before.
Yeah, exactly. We actually had, when we made that comparison, that was our censorship episode, I believe, that we also had guys from the UK who actually were the guys who were tuning in, making comments, and they were actually helping us to, or not helping us, but they were also making really good points that we were able to back up with more evidence, and it were really interesting conversations. So if you want to, whatever you're saying, slandering us or whatever it is, just make sure you go back and get all the information, because we've actually already covered this before. Okay, here's another message.
When my husband was gone and a pack of boys jumped our backyard fence and came into our yard, I sure felt a lot safer knowing I had a shotgun that I was able to pull out and chase them away instead of me or my kids being harmed.
Yeah, because in the modern day world, you really don't know what they could have done, especially jumping into your backyard. I mean, you don't know what they could have done if they had come into a gas station and had been violent, or literally anywhere where you're at, any register, any place, any store in the entire country, wherever you're at. If they come into a public situation, you don't know what they have done. But if they are jumping the fence of your own private home, that's a castle doctrine situation where you've now invaded my property and you have forfeited your life until the moment that you step back off the property.
Exactly. And thankfully, most Americans are not trigger happy. If you step on my property, I'm going to shoot you. But
even though movies paint it that way, that's not the reality.
Right. And thankfully, most people, as soon as they see a gun pointed at them, they're turning the other direction and running as fast as they can. I'm sure that's what those boys did.
Yeah, so if you think about that, there's such a, like, for instance, what you just said there, Collie, when that's a great example of you just had to point your gun or hold it and they saw it and ran away. When you have 3 million instances on average every year of guns actually being fired at an individual, whether it's hurting them or being maybe fired into the air, whatever, a gun being fired in order to defend yourself, and you think of how many instances all someone has to hear is like of a shotgun.
Right.
How many times, if there's 3 million guns fired to protect yourself, how many more times has someone brandished a weapon or made a noise or racketed it or really anything just to get someone's attention, so they realize that they are now in a situation where they can easily lose their life if they were to continue down this path.
Yeah, and that's one of those instances where it's the unreported situations where a gun was brandished or a gun was shown, and it may have not saved your life. Right? We don't know if those boys had guns or not, but it could have, especially if it had been a violent person. And at the very least, it stopped them from doing anything more than hopping your fence.
Exactly, yep.
Fuck America, innit? Like, just fuck it, bro.
We try to keep the comments clean. That was 2 F words in like 2 seconds. So, just try to keep the comments clean, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
I couldn't understand what you were saying anyway.
I bring this up because you've mentioned it twice now in talking about the free speech and the freedoms that America has versus other countries. You have specifically mentioned that other countries are able to, in other countries, people are able to bring legal action against others for saying things that they find offensive. America does have this. This is known as a slander suit. So somebody who believes that you have said something untrue or damaging to your reputation, you can legally file a legal charge against them and have them held accountable for saying that thing. That is a legal proceeding that exists in this country.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We have that. We have those laws in America, and the extent of those laws is exactly like you said, that if someone says, if Coulson says that I am a racist and my boss fires me because Coulson said I was a racist, then I can sue him because I lost my job. There's actual stuff that happened as a result of him calling me racist. But to give you an example, I believe it was in Canada, someone was seen kung fu fighting at a karaoke bar and they got jailed. Not because it was a karaoke bar, right? You sing at those. That is what you do. And yet someone got offended and had them, I believe, arrested for hate speech. And the difference there is that the damage in that situation is that someone got offended. There is no proof of saying, look, this person was singing kung fu fighting, and because I'm Asian, the bar kicked me out. If that had happened, and they had stated that that was why they kicked him out. Sure, maybe that is a good situation to define under slander, but in other countries, you can get fined, you can get jailed for something a lot less than what our definition of slander is in the U.S.
Like, you can walk up to someone and insult them with nothing. I'm not saying like racial slurs or anything, or does anything that harms their reputation, or gets them fired from a job, like Spencer said. You can just walk up to them and insult them with everyday language. Sorry, not everyday language, with maybe profanity or whatever, really. And you can be held criminally liable for that. Like, that's ridiculous. So in the U.S., it goes up to the point that it protects your rights until they violate the rights of another person. That's where things like hate speech come in. And what hate speech is, I'm not going to go into that. Don't nobody go asking me to start defining that. But just as it is defined, legally, that's one thing. Like Spencer said, or like you and how you mentioned, with the slander charges, those are instances where yes, they were used. Freedom of speech was used to slander another person, and that resulted in actions that affected their lives and more than just hurt feelings. You guys know what I mean. I don't like to sit here and cover every single topic of every single thing, because someone will come back to me and say, "Hey, you didn't mention this," and I'm like, "Well, it was implied with common sense that that's what I'm talking about." So, any further questions anyone has about that are concerning over things you've gone over, just consider other things that are just kind of like implied about what I'm saying. I'm not saying that what you mentioned, Calto, or I'm sorry, I probably got your name wrong there, are non-intelligent questions, because I'm happy that you asked that. Just saying that for anyone else, I'm not going to cover every single little thing. Sorry, K-Tog. I'm not going to cover every little thing, because there's just a certain amount of adult common sense that is implied with conversations.
Well, and thankfully in America, we have the right to the First Amendment. And like our show is talking about today, we have a right to the Second Amendment, but we don't have a right to not be offended by something someone says. Because if we extend our rights to never being offended, then that basically bans all speech, because something I say is going to offend someone in the world. I don't care if it's even me saying the fact that the sky is blue. Someone is going to say, no, it's actually purple. And then I can be charged for that. So we cannot extend our definitions of rights to never being offended.
Exactly, like that guy that sent in several comments just a little bit ago, and we were having a debate back and forth with him. We believe that America is the greatest country in the world. Those are words. They don't infringe on anybody else's rights, but he was offended by that. If this were a country where he was able to bring legal action against us for having had said that, that's against the freedom of speech, something that I believe very strongly in, something that maybe in the UK, I could have been charged and held legally accountable for something very simple such as that. And I said that offended him. I've never been charged with a crime in the UK before, so I don't know exactly. I don't study the laws of the United Kingdom, but I do know enough to say that yes, there are laws where in the UK you can charge someone for things that will offend one person. So that's and to me that's a ridiculous law, but everyone's gonna have to make their own opinion on that. Another message here. Ugh.
You gotta spare me an inch of that fat fucking.
Yeah, we can hear that coming.
Try to keep it appropriate. We appreciate keeping relevant, appropriate content. That way we can just have as many people listen as possible.
Yeah, it sounded like you were going to make a point there. It sounded like you were also kind of aggravated about it. So if you want to restate your thing with less profanity, because we could hear you were about to say something and then you did, just restate it with less profanity. We're interested in having conversation, debate, whether you believe one way or another about what we're saying, and that's absolutely fine. please leave your comments in, but just keep it clean, keep it intelligent. Thank you.
Hey, so I understand, like, I respect the Second Amendment, stuff like that. I believe like people like should be able to like have legally like own guns and stuff like that. But what's the objection and the pushback to like registering, as in like having like, oh, if there's like a purchase of a weapon, of a firearm, let it be registered to whoever purchases it, so that if anything turns up, it could be traced back to the owner, to the original person, purchaser of the weapon. Like, I feel like, yeah, sure, Second Amendment, yeah, all of that, but like at least let them be registered, right?
So I'm not sure where you heard that they weren't registered.
Right.
Yeah, you went in the United. Go ahead, Spencer.
In America, we do have a gun registry, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Colson. But how I believe it works is that we don't have a national gun registry, I believe, where the federal government doesn't know everyone that owns every gun. It does get recorded, and I believe it gets sent to the local government, and if there is a crime or something committed with a gun, then the state or federal government is able to requisition that record and see who bought this gun and trace it back.
Yeah. I don't know specifically one way or another if there's anyone in our audience right now who has knowledge of background check and gun registration kind of stuff, that please leave a comment. I don't know specifically whether it's national or local, but either way, in the United States, yes, guns are registered. For instance, I own an AR-15, and for ARs, the lower part is it's just called the lower. If anyone wants to look it up, you'll see what it is, and then you'll know what it is. An AR is lots of different parts that are all assembled together, like a custom gun kind of thing. And the lower is what has a registry number on it, and then everything else goes on top of that. So every time you just buy that one piece, for the government, it registers it as owning an AR-15, or just owning the lower, which is implied as owning an AR. So there is gun registry in the U.S. That's something that's been around for quite a long time, actually, or at least quite a while.
Kind of hard to shoot an AR without a lower on it.
Yeah, that's where the trigger goes.
Yes, I didn't even have to cock it or anything. All I said was, I have a shotgun, get the heck out of my yard, and I have never seen boys run so fast.
Exactly, yeah. They shouldn't have been on your property, and all you had to do was make sure that they fully and realistically understood, this is my property. I feel like you have now put me in a situation where I have to defend myself, or could very potentially have to defend myself. So just making a statement like, yes, I have a shotgun, get out, is something that, it's totally true. That's one of those instances where that doesn't get reported, but it still is an instance of self-defense in this country that is very important, and that's an essential right of having the Second Amendment. If those were boys that had a criminal background, or maybe even didn't, but they knew that there were no guns allowed, then when you say, I have a shotgun, they're just going to sit there and laugh at you and do whatever they want anyway. Because obviously they already are doing whatever they want since they hopped your fence to get into your yard.
Yeah, and that opens up a whole can of problems of, if even, we'll go teenage boys. If they're teenage boys and they hop someone's fence and they know you don't have a weapon, right? They're maybe not malicious criminals, but are they going to stop and turn around? No, especially if
or quickly run off like they did in your situation.
Yeah, if the homeowner is maybe a single mom, or someone just out on their own by themselves, those people can gain up on you. They can attack you. They will have nothing in their way to stop them stealing or looting your house, except you without a weapon to level the playing field.
Yep, and in a matter of in practice and actually how it works. I've heard people who have said, "Well, we don't really need that. Self-defense would work. Just you don't really need the Second Amendment. You don't really need to own a gun. Things like a taser or pepper spray or a knife would work just as well." And I'm like, "Well, that's really not realistic at all." Okay, for instance, in like we've already covered some of these left Democrat cities that have a lot of gun restriction, and there's a lot of gang-on-gang violence, right? A gang doesn't mean one person. Or in the instance of those 3 boys, let's just go ahead and pretend that they had malicious intent. If they know that you don't have a weapon if they know that you don't have a firearm and the best you can have is a taser, pepper spray, or a knife, a taser gets 1 shot and it's got a reload time that is more significant than the amount of time it takes someone to walk across the yard to go and get you.
And
it's
not
more than
effective.
Yeah, and it's not always effective too. Pepper spray, that's not gonna stop someone if they're determined. Like if someone's a criminal who's very agitated and they really have malicious intent against you, and so they're convinced and they really have motivation. Spraying pepper spray in their eyes might help you, but it could also just lead to them, killing you because you've now aggravated and actually harmed them, and they don't like that. A knife,
And
unless you are
for pepper spray, right? The anti-police proponents always say, "Well, why didn't you just shoot him in the leg?" Okay, why didn't you just pepper spray him in the face? If someone is running at you, the chances that you're able to aim at their eyes, right, even just their face, and get a good shot with that pepper spray is pretty hard.
Yeah, 1 second here. I'm trying to find the news report. I'm having trouble finding it right now. There was just 2, 3, maybe 4 days ago, there was a can't remember what city it was in now. It was a city in California where a mother was walking, and she was walking illegally, jaywalking through traffic with her two sons, and there was a call-in. So the cops came. It was just 1 cop car. Guy and his partner came up, and they were asking her what's going on, and she very quickly got agitated. She was obviously someone who is anti-police, and started screaming and hollering at them. She quickly brandished a knife and was waving it around. The cops they had just gotten out of the car, and they had only asked her, the only question, you could hear what was going on. The only question that they had asked is what she was doing, what was going on, if they could help her, because she was obviously a single mother with 2 kids, and it's not exactly warm outside right now. And they asked her what was going on. They asked her if they could help her, and then she started screaming at them. She then quickly brandished a knife and was waving it in the air as she pointed it towards them and was screaming at them still. She was about 15, 20 feet away at this point in time. And then she walked towards one of the officers that was on the driver's side of the cruiser, and he backed up, and then his partner was on the other side, and he walked around to the front. You could see him through the dash cam, was in front of the hood, directly in front of the passenger seat, and he started calling after her to tell her to stop walking towards him, and she turns around, and she was about at the driver's door and rushes him as fast as she possibly can, and he turns around and bolts away, and he runs into a line of trees that was on the other side of the car to the passenger side, and he runs that way, and she continues to follow after him, screaming at him all the way. And the guy who was the driver and the one who had been already approached by the lady with the knife, he fired a round quickly at her. I think it was 1 or 2 shots. And to me, it doesn't really matter how many shots it is, unless they're already dead and you just fire into a dead corpse. That's called just beating the dead horse. But the whole argument that I have, and this isn't like the main topic today, I'm just going to cover this really quick. Police are human too. Every single person in the entire country, every single person in this entire world who has ever been forced to do something to defend themselves, they are just human. So arguments like, why didn't you just shoot them in the leg? Or why didn't you just run away? And there's a very good instance right here. His partner was running away, and the cop then feared for his partner's life. I'm going to guess that cop guys, they don't like just not know each other. This is a partner that he was probably familiar with, maybe friends with, and his partner was being chased by a woman who very much so wanted to hurt him, and so he had an instinct as a human being, and we have our whole fight or flight response, right? He had the instinct to protect his partner so that he was not harmed. So when everyone makes these comments, and whether it's a self-defense scenario or whether it's a cop that is forced to fire on a person who is trying to hurt them, for instance, was it Jacob Blake, I think was the name of the guy, the cops were called on him because he was attempting to molest and assault his mother and sister inside their house. And so when they came up there, the sister came outside, and you could see this whole thing. I'm pretty sure it was Jacob Blake is the name. And because there were just so many instances last year. And her sister came outside, and she was reporting to him that he was in there and he had a knife. He was coming out right then. There was one guy who was standing on the other side in the street, and there was a guy who was standing right there, and he was the guy who was answering. Actually, wait, no, that was a different one. This guy was solo. He was by himself, and he was standing to the. If you're looking at the door, if you're standing at the door of the house, he was standing to the left, down a small flight of concrete stairs, and the sister came outside through a screen door and told the officers he's inside with a knife. And then out of the middle of nowhere, the guy bursts out of the house, jumps like down the stairs, and sprints at the officer and leaps at him with the knife, trying to kill him, like very, very clearly trying to kill him. And he turns around and fires. I know it was more than one. I can't remember the exact number. Shots into the person. Every single shot was justified, and the reaction was totally justified. And here's why: that cop is no more robot than you are right now. He has probably a family to get back home to, his life that he's now terrified for, and he was someone just tried to kill him. And I don't want anyone to leave me a comment saying that I'm being racist here, because no, this is a person attacking another person's situation. Race is not a consideration in this. Not even remotely, okay?
When you're in that type of situation, your logic goes out of the window. You have some basic logic of, okay, I need to survive and keep other people alive. But you can't, in that type of situation with someone running and leaping at you with a knife, you can't stand there for a second and think, okay, if I shoot him in the leg, or if you go like some places were wanting institute social work instead of police. Do you think a social worker who's dressed in calming blue and who's got a notepad to assess their psychological state, they're going to get stabbed immediately because they have no way to defend themselves? And in that sort of situation, you don't have the time to decide where on the person you're going to shoot or whether you're going to shoot. Right? You make that decision, and you have to sometimes deal with the consequences, right?
Yeah, and especially in this situation.
Go ahead.
You're breaking out, Spencer. This is a really good example of that situation. Not only was he not able to judge the situation and say, okay, I need to make sure I shoot him in the leg. He was fearing for his life, and he's running away at full sprint because the guy's chasing after him. So you don't see him stop, turn around, take a stance, calmly aim, and pull a trigger to get an accurate shot, because a human leg is a lot smaller than their chest. And so he just turned around, saw the guy was in his sights, and pulled the trigger to save his life. Totally justified, absolutely. And that's all I have to say about that. And that's a great example of every single act of self-defense in this whole country. It is a matter of protecting yourself. And when you remove a person's ability to protect themselves, then you're pretty much just saying their lives don't matter to you anymore.
And in that sort of situation, this is why police officers train so much, is they train so that when they're in that situation, their brain may go out of the window, but their muscles remember their training and they know what to do. Their training kicks in. Even if they're not able to think about stuff, they're able to go, okay, grab the gun, pull it up, take a shot, aim,
Don't
take
hurt
a
anybody
shot.
else.
Yeah. And that's actually for not just police officers, but everyday citizens defending themselves. That's another good thing to do, is to have that training so that you're able to respond effectively and quickly in that sort of situation. Because in that situation, if that guy had a gun, or if he had been a danger to other people, that officer's hesitancy could have cost other people's lives as well.
Yeah, not only his own. Like, let's say Jacob Blake had a pistol, right? A pistol, and he jumped out of the house and fired a shot at the cop. The cop now has to make a split-second decision, standing right there with probably little to no time to walk away, of whether or not he's going to let himself die because in the future he's going to be called a racist, or he's going to let not only his family die. I mean, the guy was inside sexually assaulting and trying to molest his mother and sister, and his sister escaped to warn the cops.
I think in that situation it was actually his girlfriend.
Well, I thought it was his mother that was inside. That's what I had heard.
Okay. In any case, he was already.
In any case,
that's
yeah. It doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who it really was. I mean, obviously, it's worse. It has different implications for it being family, but I mean, anybody really that he was doing such acts to, and then not only he was doing it, but he had a violent mindset around him to the point that he would grab a knife and charge a cop. I don't see where the argument came from at all, really. But without getting to racist comment, because we can talk all these different situations that happened last year. We can talk about this in a later episode. Let's just go ahead and continue with another message here.
Oh yeah, basically like in football, like we have this thing now when they get a fine for like football players who've been racist, so they get £100 fine for in racist to another football player.
Good instance, you can be charged for your comments. You can be charged for, maybe let's say you have a guy on the enemy team who just happens to be a different skin color than you, and you're angry that he got a goal, or you don't like him personally, right? Like, you can just be charged for having an opinion about someone in these other countries. It's different than the U.S. And
yeah, that
having. We keep bringing up the First Amendment, trying to focus on the Second.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that sort of thing, but that's one of the reasons we like the First Amendment here so much. You can go back and watch our President's Day episode on more of what we think about the First Amendment. But yeah, that's a good point of why we like the First Amendment.
Yep. Still trying to focus on the Second Amendment, so hopefully there's some more comments here. We have two more here.
Hey, fellas. A quick question. I read both of your bios. When you say patriot, are you part of that QAnon or 1776 BS? Do you believe that the former president was part of the problem in the racial stigma that is still haunting America today? And my last question to both of you, Second Amendment rights, are you looking at it demographically, or are you just pulling random stories? You know what I mean? You can pull random stories, but let's look at it demographically and understand how geographical racism can affect certain people to own a gun. Not everybody is qualified to get one, or there might not be one accessible in certain areas per demographic. Get back with me.
So we're
it sounds like you're
part of QAnon. Just to make that clear.
No. Not part of QAnon. It sounds like you're trying to bring race into this. And I generally try to avoid the topic of racism, just because I am a white person and I'm not really interested in the conversation, at least not right now. I would be if people could have more of a civilized conversation about it, and you definitely sound like someone who's going to have a civilized conversation. So you're someone who would I be interested in talking with about it.
we're arguing more from a statistical, and obviously we have stories to help support our statistics, but we're working more from a statistical point of view rather than a demographic point of view.
Yeah, when you say that, and you say that we have stories, I think the stories are actually something that's really important, right? Because the stories are examples of people who have actually experienced these situations. So, I mean, stories are used in like every other contested thing across our nation, across the world. People's stories and individuals in one way or another. For instance, you have stories of like the Holocaust for people, so that people know how horrible it was, and it helps. Stories are used to convict criminals in court. Stories are an important thing to use, and so we try to have a lot of stories, but we want to present evidence, and the evidence really says that gun control and gun bans do not work, and they just remove the ability of individuals to defend themselves, right? And there are other things in our country that need reformed, that would lessen gun deaths that don't have anything directly to do with the Second Amendment, such as the justice system. I believe that prisons should be less comfortable. They should be more miserable, so that people I believe they should be more miserable, so that people have a fuller understanding of like, this is something I don't want to go back to, so they won't repeat a crime. And those are beliefs that I have, and Spencer echoes. We echo each other with that. But it's important to look at everything from all different perspectives. So, guns in the Second Amendment is not really a racist topic. I mean, I don't want to sound racist here, and I don't want to bring it really into the conversation. At least not right now. I mean, you have things like gangs. I mean, I guess you could bring stuff in like that into there, but I'm going to avoid that for right now, and we can save that for a different episode.
Yeah.
But
for me,
guns,
the bulk of the Second Amendment topic has almost nothing to do with race, right? The Second Amendment, it doesn't. It guarantees gun rights to everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you for your comment. You definitely sound very level-headed, and thank you for asking those questions. We try to look at everything from different standpoints, and so thank you for your comment. Yeah. Do you have another comment here?
By the way, this is Vaughn with Vaughn's Corner, and you can find me at KWZL, The Weasel. Find the hashtag and listening to the shows. Hope to hear you guys soon.
Yeah, I might have to listen in and leave a couple comments, and we could further talk about what the messages you wrote today.
It's good to listen to level-headed people on both sides. It's a little hard to listen to anyone screaming, no matter whose side is on.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons that we do our live thing. We like to have a debate with people, but you commonly see people who want to infuse every 5 seconds of their speech with as many profane words as possible, and there's the common term that profanity shows a lack of intelligence. I'm not going to say every single person in the world who uses profanity is a dumb person, but I like having intelligent conversations, and the way to have good conversation from both sides is by keeping yourself level-headed and using evidence, using clean words, so you could have an intelligent conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for leaving your comments. We don't have any more comments right now, so we'll just keep going we'll go back to maybe the Second Amendment. And I want to make an analogy. We haven't covered this yet. To history. My grandfather knew a person, a lady. She was a survivor of the Soviet Union gulags under the rule of Putin.
Wow.
And she has an account that says that she lived. So the life expectancy, and this is just an example. Actually, we'll start at the beginning here. The Second Amendment takes place in terms of the Holocaust and of the actions in the Soviet
Very
Union for the gulags and things that they did, the murders there, because they removed the ability of people to defend themselves and they just left them all helpless, and then the government was able to do whatever they wanted. Obviously, they had much more dictatorial governments in that time, and that's one of the reasons that we have the Second Amendment, which gives us the right to a well-regulated militia in order to fight back against a government that might be repressive. Oppressive.
There you go.
I guess repressive too. But to go forward with that account from the lady my grandfather knew, she was a survivor of these gulags, and her husband lived in them for a total of 3 years. She says
Wow.
that there were, she personally witnessed entire just bodies, piles of people's bodies just thrown in piles throughout the workday, when they would just they would just die from lack of food, water, worked to death, things like that. This is something very similar to the Holocaust, when they had things like the Nazi camps and horrible instances that happened there. Same kind of thing happened in the Soviet Union, and it happened more recently, I think about 20 years more. So it's like I think they happened throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Anybody who wants to.
Well, and if
I don't know the
can
exact time
real
frame.
quick,
It was post World War II.
Similar things happening right now. Very few people are talking about it with China and I believe they're called the Uyghurs. It's a religion, and China is putting them in concentration camps because of their religion.
Yep, and these people, they can't do anything about it because they do not have the ability to defend themselves, something the Second Amendment gives us. That's why, if the government were to ever decide that they're going to start taking away the rights of the people, we have the right guaranteed to us by the Constitution, whether or not they recognize it at that point, to create a well-regulated militia. And that's something that's important with the Constitution. You have that lady said that there were from that my grandpa knew, the survivor of the Soviet Union gulag, said that there were over 30 million deaths that Putin himself was responsible for through his use of camps or just instant executions, working people to death, whatever it was. 30 million deaths. That's a very much so larger number. And actually, it's on the internet too, if you guys want to look that up. Anybody who doesn't believe me. That's a larger number than the Holocaust even. And the Holocaust is another good example. There was oppression not only of Jews, but of the general German public in every single country that the Nazis occupied. There was murders and deaths from anybody who didn't support the movement, or anybody who didn't fall in line was killed or sent to a concentration camp. These are horrible instances in our history that can be made in comparison to today, just like with like we covered in the past episode, the Gina Carano, when she brought it to a head. She said that one of the first things that the Nazis did in order to start these horrible circumstances was she turned neighbor against neighbor. She made the German neighbors fear their Jew neighbors. So they made them hate each other. There were instances where actually the neighbors the government didn't have to get involved. The neighbors would go out and they would kill or beat to death or just harm their Jewish neighbors, just because the government had created such intense fear through propaganda and other things.
And then the government, not only did they do that, and maybe you're about to get to this, but they also took away the guns of everyone in Germany.
Yeah, not only the guns, they took away like everything. I remember that they took away almost every weapon that someone could use to defend themselves. So I mean, they went even they went steps even further than guns. I mean, there were common investigations. They just walk through people's houses and take whatever they wanted, including all the weapons. And these kind of instances have led to the horrible instances that we have in history of the Holocaust. and then it's talked about less, but also the oppression of other Jewish, or not, sorry, not Jewish, other German citizens who were not members of the Nazi Party. They were also very harshly treated. They feared for their lives. I wouldn't say as much as a Jewish individual, but they also feared for their lives all the time. And there are firsthand accounts of this all over the place. You can see this happening. The stories are important, and they just go further to back up the fact that the Constitution and the Second Amendment give us the ability to have the right to own and protect ourselves, for the right to a well-regulated militia, the right to not have infringement upon our ability to possess a firearm to defend ourselves and our country. These are things that are ingrained into America as a whole, that without them, we lose our identity as the United States of America, and we become the socialized states of America. I mean, you create a situation where the government now has nothing stopping them. Because at this point right now, the Second Amendment is maybe just one of many reasons, but definitely a very good reason why corruption, especially coming from the left, cannot fully take over our government, because you would have physical uprising of American patriots who are going to get up in arms, and they're going to be like, okay, this is enough. This is not where our country is going. I love this country, and I don't want it falling to the corruption that you're leading it into. And so there will actually be violence that would be taken against that. There could be literal militias forming to defend the country against corruption. And people say that's an extreme case, but that's very much so. That's the reason why the Second Amendment. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why the Second Amendment was created in the first place. And people say nowadays that the Second Amendment is irrelevant for the time. It's not pertinent to the modern day. It's not pertinent to 2020 or 2021. We don't need it anymore. It's not important. You can have the right to hunt, sort of. We're going to oppose, 5 billion different restrictions on what kind of caliber you can shoot and when you can shoot, how you can shoot, what do you have to be wearing when you shoot. We're going to oppose it. So it makes it almost impossible to do that anyway. Or they could just say we're not going to allow you to have guns at all. And these are reasons why the Second Amendment was formed. The founders of our country lived through an oppressive government led by a person in a far-off land who had no will or care at all for them or their lives, and the whole taxation without representation, a big part of the American Revolution. They wanted the ability to defend themselves. They wanted to give American citizens the ability to defend themselves against a government that didn't have the interests of the country or the interest of the public at heart. And a lot of modern day politicians do not have that at heart, but they haven't gone the whole 9 yards where they're, turning the country into socialist. I do see that there are individuals who are working to try to do that, but these are some of the reasons why the Second Amendment exists. And it exists to protect the country.
Yeah, the revolution was fought. The revolution was fought by a form of the Second Amendment, right? They didn't just go out and say, we want you to not tax us, we want to be a free country, because if they had done that and they had not shown that they had not only the will to separate, but the means to separate, if they had just gone out and said, we want to be separate, England would have said, no, and squashed them. And they still tried to do that. But because they had those guns and they had that weaponry to fight against the monarchy, they were able to succeed in their separation from England because of that Second Amendment, which later became official.
Yeah, absolutely. It was ratified in 1791. Let me make sure of that. Yes, December 15th, 1791. So after the Constitution came into play, which not, despite common belief, was not the very first document that the United States used for governing. The country was founded in 1776, and then we created the Articles of Confederation. After that, we created the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution was further amended with the Bill of Rights. The Constitution was amended in June 21st of 1788, and the Second Amendment was ratified on December 15th of 1791, along with 9 other articles in the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, and we know that some of those are somewhat out of date. Right, Amendment number 3, that no soldier will be quartered in any house without the consent of the person that owns it. That one is kind of out of date, just because luckily we have expanded and we have places to house those soldiers. But almost all the rest amendments, and that one's still a good one to have just in case the government tries to do it. But especially the first 2 and the rest of them are so important and still so alive and necessary for us nowadays that we can't just say, well, it was written long ago, therefore it doesn't apply now. Just because something was written long ago doesn't mean it doesn't apply now. The Bible, for goodness sake, is a lot older than our Constitution, and we still can get lessons and rules out of the Bible, even though it was written so long ago, because it has universal, timeless principles in it, just like our Constitution does.
Yeah, exactly. We do have another message. We'll go and listen to real quick.
Guys, thanks for having this conversation. Very interesting. Something I've always loved to be able to have a chance to speak with Americans about. My opinion, as someone coming from the UK, is that, with all due respect, the Second Amendment, and again, I do mean with all due respect, the Second Amendment is a joke. There is no need to have guns in your country. Now, it's obviously not easy to completely remove them. I understand that, but as someone that comes from the UK that has no issues with gun crime, you don't see people busting into a school or into a building shooting up other people. So I would, from my personal opinion, I just think, people giving guns to people is an absolute joke. And that's just my opinion, and it'd be interesting to hear your views.
I'm loving
Thank you for being so level-headed and coherent about that. Yeah, thank you for being very... Go ahead, Spencer.
I'm just loving that we have people outside of the U.S. adding their opinion, and a respectful, clean opinion. I really appreciate that, Adam, that we're able to get those outside perspectives. As for the Second Amendment being a joke, again, respectfully, I will have to disagree with you there, just because I believe that even if what you were saying is true about there are less mass shootings or whatever, which the statistics don't clearly prove that, but even if that were the case, the Second Amendment is an insurance of a God-given right. It is the way that we protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely. Spencer said that pretty much perfectly right there. The Second Amendment is the protection of a God-given right for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And thank you very much for sending that in and being very clear-headed and respectful about that. We don't hear a lot of people who have strong beliefs to the opposite of ours that are always respectful. So that definitely makes us happy to hear someone who is clear like you are there. And yes, me and Spencer, we both disagree with you. I very strongly believe in the Second Amendment and its essential nature in maintaining the rights, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, maintaining the government of the Constitution, the Constitution of the United States is set forth. And it's different in different parts of the world. I've never been to Europe before. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make it over there. But The ability to have a firearm to protect myself, my family, to be able to stand up for my nation, and the Constitution should all, should everything break loose and go to pot, is something that to me means, it's something that to me means very much. I enjoy the fact that, not only enjoy, but it's essential to me, the fact that I have the ability to be a direct influence in voting and things like that. We have the government of the people, and the fact that I can enforce that with the power. There's comments saying the weapon, the person with the weapon is the person of the power. And that's something that it's a common phrase or plays on that. And so to be a person who has a direct influence on the power to protect the country and ensure that the government not only stays in line to make sure they do and follow the will of the people, but to make sure that there is not corruption to such a scale that it can be completely unraveled. That's something that to me means so much, just because in other countries that's not something that you have. I know you don't have that in the UK, where you have the ability, if the government were to say this is how it's going to be and you're just going to have to deal with it, you really much just have to say, okay, that's just good. I'm going to have to deal with it, because you don't have a weapon that you can grab and say, okay, we're going to form our own militia right now, and either things are going to change or we're gonna make them change. Some people might say that's a call to violence. It's not a call to violence. That's just me saying that having the Second Amendment gives me the ability to directly, as myself, without having to, just like put in a vote, directly influence the way things go by acting as someone with power. Go ahead, Spencer.
And it really protects your rights. I think you made a really good point just a little bit ago that the American and Democratic Republic form of government that we have is designed to put power in the hands of the people rather than in the hands of the politicians. And I think that the Second Amendment is just another way of doing that. The Second Amendment is a way of putting, almost quite literally, the power into the hands of the people, because if you give the people the guns, then the government is much more apprehensive about doing things that you don't like. It's the same way with a criminal. A criminal, if they know you have a gun, is not going to attack you. If the government knows that their populace is armed, and maybe the populace isn't going to do anything with those guns unless they push, like a criminal does, but as soon as they push, that the populace is going to say, no, you're not going to take my rights away, you're not going to do this, then it becomes that barrier against that tyranny, and it helps stop it before it even happens.
Yeah, so reading through some James Madison, or some evidence from James Madison's Federalist number 46, in which he stated, he compared the government of the United States to European kingdoms back at the time that he published Federalist number 46, in which he described European kingdoms as being afraid to trust people with arms. And there's a simple reason that they're afraid to trust people with arms, because when you give people the ability to have arms and to defend themselves completely and utterly, to be able to defend themselves, then you remove power from the government to do whatever they want. And when you have governments that, such as socialism, I do believe that the government of the UK, and it's not like I do believe, but it is, and to me, the government of the UK is something that just uses power to maintain control over the population. I know that politics isn't something that's super big there in the UK, but to me, it's part of my everyday life. It's something that means a lot to me. It's different. It's different than here. But in Europe, the ability to have if let's say that you were to have let's go like this. Let's make a contrast back in time. Okay, let's go to back to Nazi Germany, because there's so many good analogies you can make to that. When Hitler was taking away the weapons from the people and then seizing power as a dictator, let's just say all of a sudden you gave everyone the equal weaponry to the military, and they were able to defend themselves, right? Because that's what we have nowadays. My AR-15 is just as powerful as the M4 that is distributed universally, or M16 that is distributed to the military, and in some instances might even be better. And I'm not saying that what I want to do is to fight those that die for our country. I won't want to fight our soldiers. I'm saying that what I want to do with having a weapon and having the Constitution is to be able to stand up if something should happen, because those individuals that are in our military, they take an oath, and some of them might walk away. They might resign or just leave or defect. Not defect. Abandon. I'm forgetting the word for that now. That might be something that would happen if they were given an order to go against the population, to arrest people for reasons that they knew were against the Constitution, but they're sworn to obey the orders of the commander-in-chief. Commander-in-chief is the president, and by having a people who are armed and able to protect themselves, and able to do the exact same thing that the colonists did in the American Revolution, where smaller skirmishes and guerrilla warfare is something that we're able to, in the end, bring down the authority of the most powerful force in the entire world at that point in time. That is the same thing that can happen here. What the Second Amendment gives us is we have the right to vote, and we have our rights to a government that is governed by the people. And the Second Amendment, in terms of guaranteeing, making a well-regulated militia, is kind of like a fail-safe. This is just something, a threat hanging over the government's head. If they were to push us to the point that we need to enact the force of a well-regulated militia, we have the ability to do that completely and utterly, that we've been preparing for since the founding of the country, that every American citizen has the ability to partake in. It's something that's unique to the country. You do not have that anywhere else, especially, not just the Second Amendment, but not only the Second Amendment, this realization around the Second Amendment that it is the driving power of our country. In the end, the people should have the final say so, not some people in the government who can do what they want and then possibly or even realistically face no consequences like they can do in other countries. If a government were to decide the next day that they are going to change the way the country works, anything short of a full-on revolution would not stop them. And in America, a revolution wouldn't be necessary. It would just be like a pushback picture, right? I guess I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, but
a little bit.
Yeah, essentially, the Second Amendment is just the fail-safe guarantee that the people are the ones who have the power, not the government.
Yeah, and it was very potent and a very real idea back then that the government could turn tyrannical, because every government that these people had come from, whether it was England, Ireland, Scotland, all over, they had come from places where the government did not guarantee guns to the citizens, and a lot of them were tyrannical. And so it was something they set up then because they knew the consequences of that form of government, and it's something that I think a lot of people nowadays have forgotten the consequences of that form of government, because they say, well, it was so long ago, and they don't look to the modern day examples. They don't look to even the current right now examples of China or Russia, where human rights violations happen every day, and they don't look and think about that the reason we haven't had that happen, we have been a country for 200 years, and the reason we haven't had a tyrannical dictatorship take over is partly because of that Second Amendment, and partly because of the Constitution and our form of government, but that the Second Amendment is there for if somehow the Constitution fails and our form of government fails, it is that way of preventing an all-out end to our society and to our way of life.
Absolutely. That is just that's the perfect finale right there, Spencer. That is just the best piece of evidence you can say. The Second Amendment is a guarantee to our way of life. It's a guarantee to our rights, and it's a guarantee to the Constitution. I think I've really enjoyed our episode today, guys. Everyone who tuned in, thank you so much. I've enjoyed the comments, and I've enjoyed the debate back and forth. It's been very fun and entertaining to hear other opinions and to debate against them or to express your beliefs. Thank you for everyone for having intelligent conversation and really keeping it clean. I think there's a pretty good job of keeping your comments clean for those who left them. So thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna call it end for today. We do not have any outstanding comments, so probably the perfect time to end. My name is Colson.
My name is Spencer. We're 18 and American.
And we're signing off. Everyone, thank you for coming today, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, have a great weekend.